She didn't know the old woman she saved in that alley belonged to the most feared man in the city, until his black cars surrounded her restaurant at dawn, and every knife in the kitchen went still. One kindness, one stranger, one old woman bleeding on the pavement, and by morning, the most dangerous man in Seoul knew her name. He built an empire on fear. Then a stranger knelt beside his dying mother in the rain, and something in him that had been dead for 20 years opened its eyes. She thought she was just doing her job. She didn't know the woman she carried to safety was the reason a mafia boss was about to tear the city apart looking for her. Rain hammered the alley behind the restaurant when Lena found the old woman crumpled against the brick, blood on her temple, breath shallow. Lena didn't think. She lifted her, carried her inside, pressed towels to the wound, and stayed until dawn. She never asked the woman's name. She never imagined that name would summon black cars, silent men, and the coldest, most dangerous eyes in the city to her door by morning, eyes that would look at her like she was the only warm thing left in his world. Welcome to Afro-Korea TV. Please like, share, and subscribe. Lena Carter had run Copper Spoon for 3 years, a small soul food kitchen wedged between a laundromat and a shuttered pawn shop, the kind place that smelled like brown butter and cornbread long after closing. She was closing up alone that night, trash bags in hand, when she heard the moan in the alley. The old woman was soaked through, silver hair plastered to her face, a nasty gash above her eyebrow where she'd fallen against the dumpster. Lena didn't hesitate. She hauled her inside, laid her across 2 pushed-together booths, cleaned the wound with a shaking hand, and talked to her softly until her eyes stopped rolling and found focus. "You're safe," Lena said. "I've got you." The woman gripped her wrist with surprising strength. "Thank you," she whispered in accented English. "My son, he doesn't know I go for walks. He worries. We'll get you home. What's his number?" The old woman only smiled faintly and closed her eyes, exhausted. Lena let her sleep in the back booth until sunrise, too worried to leave her, too stubborn to call an ambulance the woman had refused. When morning light finally slid gray through the blinds, the woman was gone, slipped out sometime near 5, leaving only a folded napkin with 2 words written in careful Hangul that Lena couldn't read. She didn't have long to wonder. At 7:14 a.m., 3 black SUVs filled the narrow street outside Copper Spoon, blocking the delivery trucks, cutting off the whole block like a hand closing around a throat. The next thing she knew, the door chimed and the air in the restaurant changed. He was tall, dressed in unhurried black, and when he stepped through the doorway, every sound in the kitchen behind her seemed to hold its breath. His men fanned out along the windows without a word. No shouting, no weapons drawn. Just presence, absolute and total, like weather moving in. His eyes found Lena immediately, and something in them she couldn't name, fear, maybe, or its opposite, cracked open for half a second before he shut it away. "You are the one who found my mother," he said. Not a question. "Is she okay?" Lena asked before she thought better of it. "She wouldn't let me call anyone. I sat with her all night. I was about to go looking for her." "She is safe," he cut in quieter now. "Because of you." Up close, he was younger than the weight in his voice suggested. Maybe mid-30s, jaw sharp enough to cut glass, a stillness to him that felt rehearsed, like a man who had trained his whole face not to give anything away. But his eyes kept betraying him, moving over her like he was trying to memorize something he'd almost lost the chance to see. "I'm Seo Junwoo," he said. "You will let me repay you." "I don't need repaying. I did what anyone would do." "No," he said, and for the first time something almost like a smile touched his mouth, gone as fast as it came. "You did not. Anyone would have called the police and gone home. You stayed." Lena crossed her arms, more to steady herself than out of defiance. "Your mother needed someone to stay." He studied her a long moment, as if that single sentence had rearranged something behind his ribs. "Yes," he said quietly. "She did." The next day, flowers arrived, not roses, but a towering arrangement of white chrysanthemums, the kind Lena later learned meant honor in Korean tradition, not romance. Attached was a card in sharp handwriting, My mother asks for your name. I already have it. I asked anyway. Lena laughed despite herself, tucking the card into her apron pocket like it wasn't already living somewhere it shouldn't. A few days later, he came back, alone this time, no cars, no men, just him in a charcoal coat, sitting at the counter like any other customer, ordering the catfish and greens without looking at the menu. You already knew what to order, Lena said, sliding the plate toward him. My mother described it in detail. Twice. A pause. She likes you very much. She barely said 10 words to me. She didn't need to, he said, and this time the almost smile stayed a full second longer. She said you looked at her like she mattered. Not like a job. Not like a stranger. Like she mattered. Something in Lena's chest tightened at that, unexpected and unwelcome. She busied herself, wiping the counter that didn't need wiping. Everyone matters, she said. Not in my world, he said low. In my world, people are useful, or they are dangerous, or they are gone. You are the first person in a very long time who was simply kind. For no reason. The restaurant was empty around them, the evening light going gold through the front windows, and for a moment neither of them spoke, the silence stretched thin and humming between them like a wire pulled taut. By the end of the week, he was coming every evening, always near closing, always sitting in the same corner booth, always watching the door like a man who never fully put his guard down, except when he looked at her. Word moved fast in the neighborhood. The mailman mentioned the black cars. The laundromat owner asked, only half joking, if Lena was dating the scary rich Korean guy. Lena brushed it off every time, even as her pulse betrayed her a little more each night he walked through that door. She learned small things about him in pieces, the way you learn a language, not all at once but syllable by syllable. That he took his coffee black and never finished a full cup. That he read the newspaper in 3 languages before breakfast out of habit, not vanity. That he'd learned to cook exactly one dish, badly, for his mother when he was 12 and she'd been too sick to stand at the stove, and he'd never tried cooking anything since because nothing ever tasted like it mattered as much. Tell me something no one else knows, she said one night, drying glasses behind the counter while he watched her the way other men watched television. He considered it seriously, the way he considered everything. I am afraid of small rooms, he admitted finally. Since I was young. My father used to lock me in a closet when I displeased him, to teach me control. A muscle in his jaw ticked, there and gone. I have never told anyone that. Lena set the glass down. Why tell me? Because you would never use it against me, he said, like it was the simplest fact in the world. And because I find lately that I want you to know all of me. Even the parts one have spent years burying. She didn't know what to say to that, so instead she reached across the counter and laced her fingers through his, and he held on like a man finally allowed to stop pretending he didn't need the anchor. You don't have to keep coming, she told him one evening, setting down his plate. Your mother's fine. You don't owe me dinner every night. I am not here for the debt, he said simply. I am here because I want to be. Why? He considered the question longer than it deserved. Because in my life, everything is a transaction. Loyalty is bought. Fear is manufactured. But you gave my mother something you had nothing to gain from. I have not known what that feels like, to receive something with no strings attached in 20 years. His gaze lifted to hers, steady and unguarded in a way that made her stomach drop. I find I do not want to stop feeling it. Lena's throat went tight. She turned away before he could see what that did to her face. The jealousy did not stay one-sided for long. A week later, Junwoo brought a business associate by the restaurant to close a deal over dinner, a sharp, elegant woman named Han Mira, who ran one of the city's largest logistics firms and who looked at Junwoo the way a woman looks at something she has wanted and not yet given up on. She touched his sleeve twice during the meal. She laughed too long at things that weren't funny. She called him Juna, an old childhood familiarity that made Lena's spine go rigid behind the counter. You two go back, Lena said afterward, voice carefully light, stacking plates that didn't need stacking. Our families have known each other for years, Junwoo said, watching her with the faint, dangerous amusement of a man who had noticed exactly what he'd noticed. She wanted at one time to be my wife. Our fathers discussed it before mine died. And I told her tonight in front of you that the discussion is permanently closed. He came around the counter unhurried, tilting her chin up with one finger. Are you angry? I don't get jealous, Lena lied. Your knuckles are white around that plate. She set it down, flustered, caught.
Fine.
Maybe a little. Good, he said, low and satisfied, closing the last of the distance between them. Now you know exactly how I feel every time a man dares to smile at you like he has any right to. The tension broke into something sharper one evening when a man from the neighborhood, Devin, a regular who'd been flirting with Lena on and off for months, leaned over the counter a little too close, a little too familiar, his hand brushing hers as he took his change. Junwoo didn't move from his booth. He didn't raise his voice. But the temperature of the room dropped 10 degrees, and Devin, feeling eyes on the back of his neck, glanced over, and went quiet and quickly excused himself. You didn't have to do that, Lena said afterward, arms crossed, though her cheeks were warm. Do what? Junwoo asked, all innocence, though his jaw was still tight. Glare a man out of my restaurant. I did not glare. Your face could curdle milk. The corner of his mouth twitched, the closest thing to a real laugh she'd seen from him. He was too close to you. He's a customer. He wanted to be more. And what business is that of yours? Junwoo rose from the booth then, closing the distance between them slowly, giving her every chance to step back. She didn't. None, he admitted, voice low. Which is exactly the problem. I have no claim to you, Lena Carter, and yet I find I cannot stand the sight of another man's hand where mine wants to be. The air between them went thin. Lena's heart slammed against her ribs. That's a dangerous thing to say to someone you barely know. I know that you stayed up all night with a stranger who could have died in your booth, he said. I know that you laugh with your whole face and never with your eyes unless something truly amuses you. I know you touch the small scar on your wrist when you're nervous, like you're checking it's still there. His voice dropped further. I know more of you than you think, and still I want to know everything else. Lena couldn't breathe. Junwoo. Say my name again, he murmured, closer now. I have wanted to hear it in your voice since the morning I found you. The storm came a week later, literally and otherwise. Thunder cracked over the city. The night everything shifted between them, the kind of storm that flooded gutters and knocked out power along the block. Copper Spoon went dark mid-service, customers scattering for their cars, and Junwoo stayed behind to help her lock up by candlelight. You should go home, Lena said, though she didn't mean it, not really. The roads will be bad. I am not leaving you alone in the dark, he said, and something in the flatness of his voice told her this wasn't only about the storm. They ended up sitting across from each other in the last booth, a single candle between them, rain lashing the windows. He told her, haltingly, about the mother he'd almost lost twice once. To illness years ago, once nearly to that fall in the alley. About the empire he'd inherited at 26, built on fear because fear was the only currency that kept men from betraying him. About how tired he was of being feared and never once, in all these years, being chosen. I did not think I had room left in me for anyone, he admitted, candlelight flickering gold across the hard planes of his face. And then you carried my mother out of the rain like she was worth carrying. And I have not been the same since. Lena's eyes stung. I'm scared of you, she whispered. Not because of who you are. Because of how much I already want to trust you. Then trust this, he said, and reached across the table, not to take her hand but to wait, palm open, for her to decide. I will not hurt you. Everything else I cannot promise. Not the danger that follows me, not the enemies who would use you against me if they knew your name. But this, I promise you this. She placed her hand in his. What happened after was not spoken of in words, only in the careful, trembling way he cupped her face like she might vanish if he held her too hard, the way her breath caught when his forehead dropped to hers, the long, unbearable moment before neither of them pulled away. The candle guttered low. The storm raged on outside. And somewhere in the dark of that small, closed restaurant, two people who had both convinced themselves they didn't need anyone finally stopped pretending. Morning came too fast, too bright, too honest. Lena woke first, panic clawing up her throat before her mind had even finished forming the thought. What have I done? Who have I let in? What happens now that he's seen this much of me? She was gone before he stirred. Noteless, door locked behind her. 3 days of silence stretching out like a held breath. She told herself it was self-preservation. A man like that didn't stay. A man like that had a world of enemies and obligations that had no place for a girl who fried catfish for a living. She told herself she was protecting her own heart from being the next thing he had to leave behind, before he ever got the chance to decide that himself. He did not call. He did not send flowers. For 3 days, Copper Spoon's corner booth sat empty, and Lena told herself that was exactly what she wanted. On the 4th night, she found him waiting outside her apartment building in the cold, coat collar turned up, looking like he hadn't slept. "You ran," he said, no anger in it, only something raw. I panicked. "Why?" "Because I don't know how to be someone people don't leave," she said, the truth breaking out of her before she could stop it. "Everyone I've ever let close has left. My father. My last everyone. And you have a whole world that could pull you away from me in a second, and I would rather leave first than wait for you to." Junwoo closed the distance, cold hands framing her face, forcing her to look at him. "I have buried men who betrayed me without blinking," he said, voice fierce and low. "I have never once run from anything in my life. I am not running now. I am standing outside your door in the cold because I would rather freeze here than spend one more night not knowing where you are." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I am not your father. I am not whoever came before me. I am the man who will stand in the rain outside your door for as long as it takes you to believe that." Lena's composure finally broke. She stepped into him, and he wrapped around her like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission, and neither of them said anything else for a long time, because nothing else needed saying. The trouble, when it came, did not come with fists or guns. His world ran on subtler weapons. A gossip column ran her photograph under a headline calling her a gold-digging distraction, trying to worm into a powerful family. Anonymous calls threatened her restaurant's lease. A rival business family, hoping to weaken Junwoo through scandal, began spreading rumors that Lena had been paid to seduce him, hoping to shame him into cutting her loose before an important merger vote. Lena found out about the merger vote from a stranger who cornered her outside Copper Spoon, warning her sweetly that she was an embarrassment his family would never accept, that she should walk away now before she humiliated herself further. She didn't tell Junwoo. She started pulling away instead, shorter conversations, canceled dinners, telling herself she was protecting him from the scandal she'd become. He noticed within 2 days. "Tell me," he said, standing in her kitchen after hours, arms crossed, refusing to leave until she did. "Whatever it is, tell me now, or I will find out on my own, and I promise you I will find out." So she told him, the column, the calls, the stranger's warning, the merger vote hanging over both their heads like a blade. She told him, too, about the black sedan she'd noticed twice now, idling across from Copper Spoon in the evenings, a man behind the wheel who never came in, never ordered, just watched. "How long has he been following you?" Junwoo asked, and the quiet in his voice was worse than shouting. 4 days. Maybe 5. She hadn't wanted to say it out loud, as if naming it would make it more real. "I told myself I was imagining it." "You were not imagining it." He was already reaching for his phone, already dialing, already speaking low and rapid in Korean to someone on the other end. Within the hour, 2 of his men were stationed quietly at either end of the block, unremarkable as lampposts, and the black sedan did not return. Something in his face went utterly still, the mask he'd spent years perfecting sliding fully into place. "They came to you," he said, quiet and lethal. "They threatened your business. They tried to frighten you into leaving me." He shook his head slowly. "They have made a mistake they will regret." "Junwoo, I don't want a war." "There will be no war," he said. "There will be a correction." He took her hands, voice softening even as his eyes stayed hard. "You are not an embarrassment. You are the only clean thing in my life. I built an empire out of people who feared me. I will not let anyone make the one person who never feared me disappear. He did not raise a fist. He did not need to. Within a week, the gossip column that had run the story issued a quiet retraction after its editor discovered exactly whose advertising dollars kept the publication afloat. The rival family that had pressured Lena's landlord found their own lease agreements suddenly under very public, very inconvenient legal review. And at the merger vote itself, in front of the boardroom that had quietly voted to make Lena a condition of the deal, Junwoo stood, looked every one of them in the eye, and told them plainly that the merger would proceed with his personal life exactly as it was, or it would not proceed at all. Nobody in that room doubted he meant it. Word came to Lena's second hand, from his mother of all people, who showed up at Copper Spoon that afternoon with the same steady grip on her wrist she remembered from the alley. He has never fought for anything the way he fought for you, the old woman said, settling into the corner booth like she belonged there. Not the business. Not his own name. You. She patted the seat beside her. Sit. Let an old woman finally properly thank the girl who saved her life and gave her son his back. That evening, Junwoo came to Copper Spoon after closing, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with relief. Lena met him at the door, and this time neither of them hesitated. She was in his arms before the door had even fully shut behind him. It's over, she whispered against his chest. It's over, he said. No one will threaten you again. Not while I am breathing. She pulled back just enough to search his face. You didn't have to burn your whole world down for me. I would burn down every version of my world that did not have you in it, he said simply, and there was no performance in it, no grand declaration for show, just the plain, quiet truth of a man who had already decided. I have spent my whole life being feared. I did not know what it was to be chosen until you carried my mother out of the rain and never once asked what it would cost you. He tipped her chin up. Let me choose you back. Publicly. Permanently. Let the whole city know exactly who you are to me. He proposed 3 weeks later, not with cameras or spectacle, but in the quiet of Copper Spoon after hours, the same corner booth, the same candle relit for the occasion, because that was where it had started, and he wanted it to be where it truly began. I am not a simple man, he said, kneeling by the booth, a small velvet box open in his palm. My life will always carry danger, weight, expectation. But I would rather face every bit of it with you beside me than face an easy life without you at all. Marry me, Lena. Let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never once regret staying that night in the rain. She said yes before he even finished the sentence, laughing through tears, and the kitchen that had witnessed the whole quiet, dangerous, tender unraveling of them both witnessed this too. The candlelight, the ring, the promise. They married the following spring, a small ceremony blending both their worlds, hanbok and soul food, his mother beaming in the front row beside Lena's own family. No black cars needed because no threat remained brave enough to test him again. Devon came, grinning without a trace of hard feelings, and even Han Mira sent flowers with a note that read, simply, he finally chose someone who deserved him. Copper Spoon stayed open, busier than ever, the corner booth unofficially reserved forever, a small brass plaque added to the table that read only, where it began. Almost a year to the day after that stormlit night, Lena sat across from her husband in that same booth, candle between them, and told him, hands trembling with joy instead of fear this time, that their family was about to grow by one more. Junwoo, feared boss, unshakable negotiator, a man who had once been unable to remember the last time he'd let himself want anything, put his forehead to hers the way he had that very first stormy night, and wept without a trace of shame. You saved my mother's life, he whispered. And then you gave me mine. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that in a small soul food kitchen between a laundromat and a pawn shop, the most dangerous man in town had finally, completely, come home.